Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm grateful to be here with you all on this brisk winter morning here in Boston. I remind you that we are only 45 days out of the spring clock change, as if that matters in Boston, but I wanted you to imagine a place where it matters. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Chad. I want to thank the Rennie Center for the production of this report, not only the data, but also the recommendations. Because for us, it not only paints a picture of the opportunities, but it also paints a picture of the challenges that need to be addressed. In many respects, as I read the report, it reminded me of the story that Charles Dickens outlined, The Tale of Two Cities. On one hand, you have a state that is performing at a very high level relative to other states nationally, but on the other hand, you have these opportunity gaps that still exist. So I think, as Professor Hargrove has outlined, the new thing that this state is challenged to begin to address and move forward in a meaningful way on is how do we provide what we know that we can provide to all students, regardless of where they live, regardless of income, regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender. And I'm glad to be with this panel to have that discussion. And with that, I want to start the discussion with Jay. And Jay, Chad outlined, and the report outlines the challenges that exist in early education, the opportunities. 65% of the 64% of the students have access, but as we look at the third grade proficiency level, only around 35%. Number one, do we believe that in this political climate that equity and excellence can exist? And what are the steps that the state needs to take moving forward in order to pair them a little better?
Thank you for the very simple question to answer. So let me take the next 2 hours and attempt to do that.
30 seconds.
Before I answer the question, I just want to thank the Rennie Center. You do great work. The conditions report is a valuable contribution to the work that we and the other members of the boards and our great departments do every day. So I want to thank you for the good work and valuable report. I also want to I see other members of the Board of Early Ed here. We've got a great board, and I know our great commissioner, Tom Weber, is here, and probably some of the other great team at Early Ed. So I just want to thank them for everything they do. I also want to acknowledge our new Secretary of Education, Jim Pizer, who's here today, and we're going to hear from. Looking forward to hearing his comments, and just want to congratulate you on your appointment and let you know looking forward to working with you and the Baker administration moving forward. So I'll answer your question. 64%. I read the report to say that of all the kids who receive subsidized early education and care services from the Department of Early Education and Care, 64% of them are in so-called quality programs, defined as self-reported level 2 or above. Mm-hmm. So let's just take a minute to talk about what that actually means. Based on the way that's defined, I calculate that to be about 19,000 kids aged 0 to 5. We have, based on 2010 census data, about 450,000 children in the Commonwealth who are aged 0 to 5. Now, not all of them are being served by the Department of Early Education and Care. Many of them are getting privately funded services, and many in quality programs. But I think it's safe to say, based on that data, the fact that we have 12,000 kids on a waiting list who are eligible for subsidized coverage through early education and care between ages 0 to 5. And by the way, eligible defined at a level that I think many people would believe is very low. So just as an example, in order to be eligible, if you're a family of 4, you can't make more than $52,000 a year to get subsidized coverage for your kids. The average cost of early education and care in Massachusetts is about $12,000 a year. So that means a family of 4 with 2 kids who potentially are in that age bracket needs to pay about half their salary. If they make $53,000 a year and aren't eligible, about half their annual income for early education and care. It is not workable. And so we've got clearly a huge number of that population of children in our state who cannot access quality early education and care services. I'm optimistic, to answer your question finally, about our ability to work together to get to a place where we're doing that. And the board and the department have been doing a lot of work and put together and actually voted on a comprehensive plan moving forward for how we get to a place in a multi-year strategy where we have determined what affordability should really mean, where we have improved through a number of strategies that we're implementing the quality of the early education and care that we're providing to our children across the state, and getting to a place where we're taking this really critical period in a child's development, critical, arguably the most important, and making sure that we are providing that access to kids who need it all across the Commonwealth.
Well, I want to stay here just for a minute. Can you talk a little bit about some of those steps that are being taken, we need to take in order to increase access, as well as this issue around quality? 38% proficiency, third grade, among high-need students.
Yep. Talk about a bold opportunity we have. So we need to take a number of different steps to get there. The report, we actually as a board over the last 6 months went through a process of taking a step back and really looking at the state of early education and care in Massachusetts, a public stakeholder outreach initiative. And we came up with a lot of the same conclusions that are noted in the report as to the challenges we face: access, workforce development, making sure that we've got a pipeline of professionals in this field who are prepared to deliver quality early education and care services, standardizing across our mixed delivery system, using the QRIS infrastructure and construct that a lot of great work has been done over the last few years to develop, to have a common set of standards to ensure that in our mixed delivery system we've got all of our children receiving high-quality early education and care. One example of an approach that we voted to take to try to move this forward is to move away from a system where we pay every educator the same and move to a system of tiered reimbursement within the next few years where we are paying for better quality to incentivize early ed programs to reach that QRIS level 3 and QRIS level 4 that we want them to get to in order to ensure that we are we're taking advantage of that opportunity we have with the interactions with children to get the biggest bang for the buck and the best opportunity for success for them. So that's one example among many that we're pursuing.
Okay, thank you. Margaret, I want to go to you next. You know, you spent your life, significant part of your life as a civil rights attorney. You're very aware of the challenges that exist with the disparities in an educational system. And so in many respects, when you get a population of students where we see these gaps, it's about providing the necessary supports so that they can achieve a high quality outcome. Can you talk about the way currently within the system that teachers and schools are able to assess the supports necessary for students, and how we're able to operationalize the delivery of those supports at a systems level?
First, let me say what he said about everybody. Thank you. So yes, I mean, my commitment through my life as a civil rights lawyer and as an educator has been on equity and access. Can we do this? Absolutely. Is there an urgency about it? I'm not so sure. This is about poverty, okay? This is about poverty. People don't say poverty anymore. This is about poverty. The kids we're talking about are poor. What do we owe them? We owe them access to good early childhood, and not just with Jay's group, but with Health and Human Services in a coordinated way. We owe them a school site coordinator who goes out to families when kids don't show up, so there's high attendance. We owe them food. Massachusetts is 44th out of 50 states in providing breakfast to poor kids. Inexcusable, fixable, costs no money, all federally reimbursable. So only about 40% of our kids who have free and reduced lunch get breakfast. Breakfast works. Obesity, nutrition, shown to, lower nurses' visits, raises attendance, and raises academic achievement. Summer, 2/3 of the achievement gap can be related to out-of-school time. So poor kids in the summer lose 2 to 3 months. Middle-class kids gain in literacy. Our poor kids lose. So, and the holistic approach, I mean, we have done phenomenal in Massachusetts in terms of raising scores. Now we need to, as I heard Andy say, shift, not abandon, but shift and add this socio-emotional part to what we do. And that includes training of teachers and supporting teachers. Poor kids, the percent of poor kids who enter with trauma and knowing how to deal with that is challenging. So yes, how do we do it? What do we emphasize? I'd give a lot of my money to Jay.
Did everybody hear that?
Because preschool.
Tweet that.
Yeah, tweet that, right. I don't have any money or any control over money, but I would give it to you, Jay. Preschool is so important, but out of school time, we're just not paying enough attention to those basic needs of poor kids.
And I think you're right in the sense that we have to set up a system where we give students a great start. However, for the parent whose child is in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and we miss that opportunity,
Yeah.
what are the avenues for their child to receive the supports necessary to succeed? And again, how's the state and how are systems operationalizing the delivery of those supports?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think one of the ways kids catch up is out of school time. If you're behind, during the school year, all kids progress at about the same rate, but the kids who are behind don't catch up, and that's cumulative. So we have to have high-quality after-school and summer programs for those kids to catch up and do well. And we got to find a way, like school site coordinators, who are the first people when the budget cuts disappear, who can give that one place where parents can go to understand all of the resources that are available to them. And we need to do better coordination of all of our services so parents can find them. It's hard to find.
So if we know these things,
Right.
and Chad has outlined a number of programs that are successful, what is the challenge in putting them in play, operationalizing?
I don't know. You didn't elect me as the governor last time or this time, so I don't know. It's very difficult. Massachusetts has been a place where we're really concerned about doing extremely well on achievement scores, and that's good. But that's where the emphasis has been, and it needs to continue to be there. But I think it's now we need to, as Andy said again, need to shift, and we haven't talked much about these things. We've been concentrated on achievement and assessment and data. We haven't looked so much underneath to see how we can improve that in terms of the issues around equity. And I think hopefully this is a great start. There's a lot of people in this audience, I know, who are working on these issues, but it hasn't been in the central conversation.
Okay. So if we move down the line, we get to you, Charles.
Hey.
And if we're unable to catch them in early education, and if we're unable to catch them in the K through 12 system, data indicates that close to 35% of the students who attend the public colleges and universities in Massachusetts require some remediation or have to take at least 1 or 2 remedial courses. What is it that the higher education system can do or is currently doing to build a bridge, the K through 12 system, to make that a more seamless transition, receiving those supports to increase the attainment level?
Yeah, thank you for that question. But first, let me say again to Chad and the people at Rennie, this has been a spectacular piece of work that you've done. You've brought a lot of powerful information and a lot of insight to this conversation that we're all participating in. And I have to reiterate what I said last year when I was here, that it's so critical that Rennie continue the work that you're doing in bringing this information and insight to people. Most of the people that are sitting in the room today are practitioners. We're on the ground. We're doing work on a day-to-day basis. We don't have strong research staffs and teams to produce this kind of data and analytics that will enable us to see where the issues are and what steps we need to take to address them. So Rennie is providing a very valuable resource to the broad community of people, all of us, all of whom are very concerned about these issues. So thank you very much for that work. Andy Hargrave, I wanted to say to you as well, I loved your presentation. It was absolutely spectacular. It proves that great institutions like BC have top scholars who are doing important research and bringing insights to us again that can help us make decisions and take actions that are informed by research and that can help us make decisions that can be helpful. So to get back to your question, what's the dilemma that we're having? And to all of you who are here today, thank you for coming. People who know me know this, that I do this. I have a tendency of going off in different directions, but that's just the way it is. Higher education, public higher education in Massachusetts has been a challenge for quite a long time. We have as was Andy said just a few minutes ago, we have the best higher education institutions on earth. We know what high quality education looks like. We know what it needs, what you need to do to create great institutions. We know how to recruit and train and keep high quality scholars, and we've done that at institutions that we could throw a stone and hit from this building that we're standing in. The question has been, for those of us who have been concerned about public higher education, is that in the Commonwealth we haven't paid as much attention to the need for high quality public education as the times now dictate. And so we've shifted our attention in the Commonwealth to recognize that there's an international arms race for talent on earth today. Everywhere, every country, every business is looking for the best trained, best informed, best educated people that they can find, and everyone wants them. And so our great institutions, as great as they are, alone are not capable of doing this. So we must have high quality public educations in order to sustain what it is that we've been able to achieve in the Commonwealth and to ensure that the quality of life and our economic viability and capabilities as we look forward continues to be what it has been in the past. So high quality public education is critical and essential. Backtracking on that, our public institutions have, in my opinion, a responsibility to be engaged with our K through 12 system and our early education and training folks, and looking at these issues, trying to figure out solutions to these issues, and providing high-quality personnel who can be on the ground and help them to address these challenges. And again, schools, colleges, and departments of education, of which we have 8 in the public sector, are producing good teachers and high-quality teachers, but we need to give them more supports and more resources so that they can be more effective in meeting the needs of our schools as we understand them. This is a lot. It's not an easy task to do, but this is work that we have to focus on as we look to the future.
So I get that we have to paint an agenda moving forward, and at the same time, these high-need students are not new. It's not a new population.
Yes.
These are not new to our system. Can you talk about what is currently being done?
Yeah.
And what you highlight as effective methods that are employed as we begin to look to the future?
Well, I spent a lot of years at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. One of the things that we're concerned about is how does the university do collaboration and work in the Boston public schools? How do our community colleges do work in our public schools? How do our 9 state universities do work with the schools that they're collaborating with? All of these institutions, I believe, are working to address the issue that I think Margaret did an excellent job of identifying. Poverty, Young people, some have unearned assets and others have unearned liabilities. If you're poor, you have unearned liabilities, and they can be very damaging and destructive. Our colleges and universities are working with K through 12 schools. They're working with K through 12 teachers. They're trying to figure out how do we align our curricula so that the expectations that we're setting in K through 12 align with what our expectations are when we get to higher education. Teachers and faculty are working collaboratively with each other. 2 programs at Massasoit and Mount Massachusetts were discussed today. School to career, dual enrollment activities where high school faculty and secondary school faculty work collaboratively on scaffolding up the skills that students need to be successful in higher ed. It was said that 35% need developmental ed, but 65% don't. That's significant to say that many students are coming out of our public high schools today and are getting into higher education and are doing well in higher education. But that does not mean that we should not continue to focus greater attention on the needs of the students that are most disadvantaged by the conditions and circumstances over which most of these young people have absolutely no control. Just one other point to say that when you look at the data that's presented today, we have an intergenerational attainment gap. It's from early education and care, it's in elementary and secondary, it's in higher education. These are sustainable problems that cut across these generations. And why we are pushing so hard for high quality public education is we want to bring more of our faculty, we want to do more of our research, we want deeper engagement with our businesses and with our schools in addressing these challenges.
Okay. One of the things that was highlighted in the report, and as I listened to you all, we talked about the need for resources. And in many respects, to do a lot of what we are talking about, it's going to take more resources, but there are some limitations. And the management thought leader Peter Drucker said, what you decide not to do is just as important as what you decide to do. So I want to ask you all, in each of your particular areas, what are the things that you would decide not to no longer do in order to do X, Y, and Z?
Can I take a stab at that?
Sure.
So Commissioner Weber often makes fun of me because I used to be the Secretary of Administration and of Finance in charge of the state budget during the worst fiscal crisis the state ever faced. And he says that in this position now, I act a lot differently than I did then. And I'll be unabashed about that. I was thinking about Professor Hargrave's comments about urgency and the bold opportunity. What is that bold opportunity we have? And I was also struck the other night in the President's State of the Union speech by something he said about climate change being our biggest national security threat. Let's act like it. The research that the conditions report cites about early education is pretty compelling about the impact it has on a child's future academic success and life success. And by the way, that not only helps that child, it contributes to the family's well-being, the ability of a parent to work, and it contributes to our society's well-being, our economy's well-being. So this is potentially the biggest return on investment we can get in state government. And right now, in terms of state resources we spend on early education and care, state funding, I think it's less than $50 million. In K through 12 right now, so I'm coming back to your point to offer money, are we over $5 billion yet? We're probably close to $5 billion in Chapter 70 funding. On top of that, we dedicate cent to the sales tax to School Building Authority for K through 12 school construction, which is close to another $1 billion or so. Higher ed, I know we're spending something over $1 billion a year on public higher education. Early education and care, potentially the most critical point in a child's life in terms of their potential development and positive impact on society generally, and we're basically spending nothing. So, bold opportunity. I'm not the Secretary of A&F anymore, so I don't need to make the trade-off choices and answer your question directly, which is the nice thing about the position I'm in right now. But let's just say there is a huge opportunity in this area in particular for us to act like it. Just one other example in this area. In order to have that quality system we need to get those results we're talking about, we need a provider system of educators who are prepared to deliver that quality education and who are valued in doing so. Right now, the average salary of an early education provider is $25,000 a year, compared to a starting salary in K through 12 of $40,000. First of all, $25,000 a year is shameful. It's not even close to enough to live on, let alone if we're trying to attract a highly qualified workforce to deliver the early education and care that our children need. So act like it. I think we've got a huge opportunity to make a meaningful difference in what we're doing in the area of early education and care, and we need to start acting like it.
But Jay, if we agree with everything that you say, it's going to take more resources. So to some degree, the question is, what is the plan to find those additional resources? Or how are you going to repurpose the resources that exist? So if we're going to create this urgency around it, we have to answer the question around the resources also. And that's the piece that I'm asking for some insight on.
Yeah, and I was being flipped before and saying that I'm not the Secretary of A&F anymore and don't have to make those trade-offs. And to be serious about it, those trade-offs are hard. And obviously, it's hard to ask people to pay more. It's hard to take from one bucket and move it to another bucket. There are consequences and trade-offs to every decision we make. I think the challenge we have in this field and in this room is educating others, other policymakers, legislators, policymakers who control the purse strings, and the public generally, about the importance of investing in this area, so that those people who have to make those trade-offs do so much better informed about what the return on investment is in this area versus that area. And so I think that's our responsibility. We aren't in the position to actually move the money around or decide how much money there is. We are in a position to help empower those who are with the information that they need to make those trade-offs as thoughtfully as possible, and I think that's our responsibility.
Margaret, Charles?
Well, I think that the resource question always is a tough one to deal with because money is not easy to come by, and these are tough times. But I do think if you look around the room today, another point I meant to say, Chad, which is that it's great that we're all here together having this conversation together. And the fact is that by working together, I think that there's probably a lot more efficiencies that we may be able to find in the work that we're doing than working in isolation. We certainly have found that was the case in what we're doing in public higher education. So that we moved to performance incentive funding, which is to say, what are the things that are really working, and how do we focus resources on those things that are really working, and using the dollars that we have as wisely as we possibly can, so that we can demonstrate to the public that we seriously understand how difficult it is to get these dollars. We've also moved to funding formulas so that when we look at if institutions are in fact achieving the objectives that we know need to be achieved and that we're all saying are important, that we put resources at those institutions so that they can improve that work, share those best practices with other institutions that may be struggling. So I think that we have to recognize that money is just not going to flow freely to all of our institutions, and that if we want to get these things done that we all know need to be done, we're going to have to work together in ways that we haven't in the past. This is a radically independent state, and we like to have our autonomy. But the fact of the matter is that the time, not autonomy. I mean, the times now call for us to be much more, to synthesize our work together and to share our practices. And in doing that, I think we probably and most likely will find much more efficiencies than we have in the past. And we certainly are encouraging that.
So again, it is it's an easy question, a difficult answer. I think at DESE, we need to make sure that the implications of our mandates in terms of what it takes. I heard Andy talk about teacher evaluations. Great idea, but not if the principal is spending 60% of her time visiting classrooms. You know, not opposed to it. Absolutely can be useful to the teacher, can be useful to the principal, can be useful to the school, but we need to think about the time and therefore money that we're using to do these kinds of things. You know, I know you're not supposed to say the word, is there too much, the question is there too much testing? Because every time I say that, somebody says she's opposed to testing, or she's opposed to assessment. I absolutely am not. I think testing and data needs to be useful. It's very expensive, it's very time-consuming. We need to review and make sure everything we require is used appropriately, and we are not overusing the days to prepare for a test, to give a test, and recover from a test. All that's money. We need to shift some of our resources at DESE from compliance to more support. We need to be seen as partners to the superintendents and to the districts, and to think in every way we can to be supportive. And you know, there's only so much we can do with compliance in terms of level 5 schools, in terms of Lawrence or other systems, because they're not sustainable on a scale. They're too expensive. So we got to think about what can we do holistically about the whole system. And this is not ideology. I don't have any question that Governor Baker or Governor Patrick or Jim or anybody, we all have the same goal here, which is to educate every kid. We can't let a focus on one thing get in the way of the whole child and get in the way of us asking those tough questions without being seen as an ideologue one way or the other. I mean, let's examine what we do in each of those schools from the mandates we have from DESE and make sure they are doing what they're supposed to do. And those kinds of questions are so important to ask, but there's sort of this veneer that if you ask them, somehow you're opposed to what you're questioning about. We need to open up that dialogue in a way that makes sense and saves money and saves time and helps kids.
I think to your point, Margaret, around the political climate, you know, a number of funders, we had the opportunity to visit some of the countries that are currently outperforming the U.S., you know, Finland, Singapore, and we went there to ask questions around some of the things that they've done over the last 10 years to turn things around. And I guess we asked so many questions that when we were in Singapore, we asked, what did you do to turn things around? They said, well, we came to the U.S., we went to your universities, we read the research, and we went back and implemented it.
Exactly.
True story. Which goes to say that we don't necessarily have an innovations challenge, we have an execution challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Likewise, when we went to Professor Hargrove's Ontario, we heard about the great work that was happening there. And of course, before leaving, we asked our colleague Michael Fullen, do you think that this could happen in the US? And he said, no, because your political poles are too far apart. So I want to hear from you all, is the majority of our problem that we have an operations execution challenge or a political challenge?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think, in thinking about your question, I'm thinking back to one of the things I think Chad said in his remarks, that generally speaking, we know what to do, right? I mean, this is not, it's not that complicated in a lot of respects. It's how we actually do it. Funding is a piece of it, and executing is a piece of it. And there are differences. We generally know direction we need to go and the things we need to do. There are, of course, differences of opinion and arguments within those buckets. I think in my experience in government, and so far in my short time with experience on the Board of Early Education and Care, and generally in life, so much of being successful at something is collaboration, working together, communicating, developing relationships, being respectful. And I think, you know, in our political culture, certainly at the national level, we have challenges in all those areas. One of the things that I think we in Massachusetts can take a lot of pride in is we're generally pretty good at that. And what's interesting about now kind of full-fledged joining this area, and this meeting's a great example of it. As Secretary of A&F, I used to hold forums and meetings on like fiscal policy stuff, and I would sit in the room by myself. Look at everybody here today. Yeah. Look at how robust the community of stakeholders who care deeply about education in Massachusetts is. And I know, even though I haven't been a direct participant in it for very long, that a robust discussion has been happening for decades in this area with many people. And not everybody agrees. But look at how much progress we've made. And I think we've got a lot to be proud of based on the results and a lot of what people have said before. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm very optimistic about the likelihood of our being able to succeed, because we've demonstrated we've got a robust community who cares a lot about that goal, who agrees enough on what we need to do, and who's committed to working together and collaborating to get to where we need to be.
I agree with Jay. It's a coordination, collaboration, and it's the ability to look at some of these things that are political hot buttons and understand that you're not for or against things. You're not for charters or against them. You're trying to figure out how they work best to serve kids. You know, you're not for testing or against it. I think politics divides people. It's an attempt to sort of force you into you're pro-union or you're anti-union, you know? And that debate is very unhelpful to kids, very unhelpful to kids. We're all for getting kids' education better, and we need to find ways that keep ideology and politics out of it so that we're not forced into one corner or the other. We're forced into doing the best thing, no matter what it is.
So I think that, we've got some real challenges ahead of us. However, I do, as has been stated already, I think that Massachusetts is a unique state. It's a very special state, and a lot of the work that's shaped education in the nation has its roots in Massachusetts. But the big challenge that we have right now is how are we going to provide high-quality education to all youngsters from whatever background they come from. We're at a strategic inflection point right now. We know how to educate students to very high levels, and all the data indicates that. The question now is we must turn our attention to how do we educate all students in the Commonwealth to very high standards. And if we do that, think about the impact that that's going to have on the nation to prove that it can be done and that what it takes to get it done. And I think that we have the capabilities and the capacity to do it. And someone said earlier about the sense of urgency about this. I think this is now our time to turn the page and to say that we're going to make this education system work, and we're going to put our shoulders to the grindstone, and we're going to do the work necessary to make that happen. It's as simple as that.
With that, help me in thanking our panel for this discussion.